Hello. Are you getting ready for the Easter season? I just love Easter. It's my favorite time of the year because it brings newness of life. And the unexpectedness, you never know what to expect on Easter morning. I'm sure if you think back through your life, you can think about some funny things or maybe some sad things that happen around the Easter season in your own life. For the disciples getting ready for that first Easter was a little bit surprising for them. They went through a lot of unexpected things. Sort of like us. Have you ever bought something based upon the packaging and you were unable to open the box? Or maybe you bought something from Amazon and you just had to go by the description? Or sign up to hear a speaker just based on his bio? And then in more cases than once, you've replied, "Oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be." Yep. That's probably the way it was for Simon the Zealot, one of Jesus' disciples. See, he was probably from Galilee and probably very fanatical for the law of Moses, keeping every law right down to the barest details. Now, the Zealots were a group of people under the leadership of Judas, not Judas Iscariot, but another Judas, okay? And they were upset because taxation by the Romans was growing and growing. And the census had taken place not too long ago, and they were expecting another increase. It had just been going on for years. And, we can sort of identify with that. Only these people, the Zealots, were getting ready and looking forward to an overthrow of all the Roman authority. And they believed that one day the Messiah would come, and he would come in the form of a mighty general who would lead their people into the successful overthrow of the Roman government and freedom for Israel. Simon was likely an active member of this group when he first joined the disciples. He thought that Jesus was going to lead them. After all, Jesus did talk about freedom. And he was expecting maybe him to be that mighty general. And he was all for a radical overthrow. He wanted change to happen. And he wanted this mighty general, this Jesus the Messiah, to bring about change, deliverance. But Simon's thinking all changed one night.
As a young man, I had experienced firsthand and quite often the indignities, the brutality of the Roman occupation, an affront to Israel. Eventually, I joined in with the Zealots. Spent my nights plotting against the Romans, spent my days taking down names, noting any Jew who, in my opinion, didn't show sufficient hatred for our enemies. I was determined to return Israel to its proper authority. It was black and white. So, why, as an old man with my hard and certain ways, did I find myself sitting across the table from a man who taught the exact opposite of everything I've fought for my entire life? I can't answer that with any reasonable explanation. At the meal that night, the Passover meal, I think someone later dubbed it the Last Supper, Jesus gathered all of us around the table, his enthusiastic followers. He passed around bread, he poured wine, he spoke unsettling words. "This is my blood of the covenant," he said, "which is poured out for many." Those words, "my blood poured out," they hung in the air. I, of course, was familiar with pouring out blood. I mean, what great cause worth fighting for does not spill some blood? Jesus, I think, had a different idea about what it meant to pour out blood. Well, we all knew, well, I knew anyway, what Messiah was all about. Messiah was coming to bring the sword, to destroy our enemies, to spill their blood. Jesus told us to love them instead. And all the battles I had fought, which for my whole life it seemed so right, just sifted through my hands like dust. And that night, I began to lay it all down, bit by bit, finally, my causes, and to simply follow, step by step, follow this man, this curious warrior, Jesus.
That night, everything about Simon changed. Simon's beliefs about Jesus changed. His expectations changed. Everything that he thought that Jesus was going to do had a radical change. Now, what caused all this change? Was it that what Simon believed about Jesus was untrue? No, not necessarily. It wasn't untrue. It was just not directly on path. It wasn't 100% right. You see, his view of this Messiah was different. It went along with what people of the day thought. He was correct in believing that Jesus did come to fulfill the Old Testament prophecies. And he was correct in believing that he was the one sent by God to be the deliverer, to be the one who would set his people free. However, like many of that day, he misunderstood what this Messiah would do and how he would go about doing it. He believed that he would set them free from the Roman laws, from the Roman government, from their bondage. Simon expected Jesus to set up an earthly kingdom. And he thought, well, he's going to be the king, and I am going to be one of the freedmen. There will be no more bondage for me. The Messiah's role, though, was a spiritual one. It was not setting them free from political bondage, but Jesus came to set them free from the bondage of sin, that they might have life and have it, everlasting life, and have it so abundantly. Jesus didn't fit Simon's role as the original Messiah that he thought was going to happen and what he was going to do, but he did fit the role of the Messiah that God had promised. He became the surprised Messiah, the one who said, I'm going to set you free. Not on the outside, but on the inside. I am going to give you a life that you never expected. Simon had been going about looking for wars, going around looking for ways to overthrow and start a new kingdom. But Jesus says, no, I've come to give you life. And not only that, Simon, you've been running around and just trying to do everything your own. I want you to know that I've come that you might have peace. And because of this, you can not only have peace, but you can have rest. He'd already told Simon back in Matthew, come unto me, all you that are weary, all you that are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I'll give you rest for your souls. Rest for where it really matters, for your mind, your will, and your emotions. That was something that Simon, as that go-getter that he was, had never considered, that he could have peace in the midst of everything. Finding rest was not anything that Simon had ever expected. He believed that Jesus could be the king of Israel, but he did not consider him as being the king of his own life. Jesus was king. He is king. He is the eternal king. And he is the ruler of all. And maybe you're like Simon. You've been going through a lot of struggles, a lot of trials, and you've just been trying as hard as you can to work things out on your own. Saying, I know what needs to be done and I know how to do it. Or maybe you're like Simon was at some point in his life and saying, there's just no hope. The situation's bigger than I am. And Jesus is standing there saying, look, come to me. I want to give you rest. I want to give you peace. I want to be your king. Not just king over the world, but king over your life. I want you to know that you can experience the peace. Well, Simon misunderstood Jesus as Messiah. He misunderstood him as king, and he also misunderstood that Jesus was the Redeemer. You see, the Redeemer was the one that was coming to redeem all that was lost, to restore everything. And Simon expected Jesus to restore to Israel all that had been lost. But what he didn't understand was he came to Simon to restore all that Simon had lost. Simon was in a world of sin. He was in a world of fighting and bickering and heavy taxation and unfair laws and an unjust government and problems all around. Simon was going through struggles without and struggles within. He needed redemption. But in order to be redeemed, someone had to pay the purchase price, the redemption price. It's sort of like going to a pawn shop. You go to the pawn shop, you put the item in, and you get a ticket and you go back. And then to get your item back, either you or someone takes that ticket and pays for the item, pays the redemption price, and walks out free and clear. Well, that's exactly what happened to Simon and what happened to us. We're no different than Simon. Our lives, our souls. Satan is the owner of the pawn shop because of what happened back in Genesis in the Garden of Eden. Jesus, or Satan, took our souls. He has them in hock, so to say. And the redemption price had to be paid. Now, none of us have the money. None of us have what it cost to pay that redemption price. You see, even if you went in holding the ticket and said, I want my soul back, and it was $1 million, and you had 100,000, it wouldn't be enough. No, you had to have the full redemption price. And the price, in this case, was blood. Without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. There's no redemption from the sin. And Jesus was the only one that could be the Redeemer. Simon was not expecting that. He thought he could work hard enough and be good enough, and he would live a life that he could be happy with. But this redemption was not just for the here and now, but it's an eternal redemption that Jesus gave. We saw him as that, as a Redeemer. And that night, when he heard Jesus talk about his blood, he realized, yes, it's more than I could ever do. Simon saw Jesus as Lord. Now, back in 1st century A.D., and even back in Bible times before then, centuries before then, the word Lord was often associated with someone who was in authority, and it showed the honor and respect given that person in authority. And Simon certainly had respect for Jesus. I mean, after all, he had seen him in his role as teacher. He had seen him in his role as healer, and he knew what Jesus could do. He knew that he could do more than anyone else could. And so he was willing to follow him. He was willing to call him Lord because of his authority. But that day, that night at the Last Supper, he started to see something different. But then, even though he started to see things change there at the Last Supper, he later saw him hang on the cross. He saw him die and thought, what use? Why did I even believe? Because if Jesus died, there's no hope. It was not until the resurrection, when the disciples were gathered in the room. 11 of them were there this time. It was his second appearance. And Jesus went to Thomas and said, Thomas, I want you to touch my hands, touch my side. I want you to know that I am Jesus and I have resurrected from the dead. And Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. And from that time on, when the disciples or any other believers talked about Jesus is Lord, it was the equivalent of saying Jesus is God. And on the day of Pentecost, on Peter's famous sermon, he said, God has made this Jesus whom you crucified both Lord and Messiah. Here it is, being all tied together. What Thomas had thought was just another man, was going to be a mighty general, has now become his Lord and his Messiah, a very personal one. And Romans 10:9 and 1 link Jesus' lordship with his resurrection. If you confess in your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. Simon's zeal was why Jesus called him in the first place and invited him to join his disciples. A zeal that he held onto even to the point of changing his lifelong beliefs, even to the point of seeing Jesus die on the cross. And then knowing that he'd been resurrected, and hanging on to that and proclaiming that Jesus is Lord even when later he certainly would have faced persecution and possible death, all because he saw the importance of Jesus as Savior. Jesus was his Savior, not of the Savior of the nation of Israel, the one that he had started to believe in, but the personal Savior. He was the one that came to save him. And he knew that the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ was what mattered, what made all the difference. And let me tell you, for you too, as you think about Easter coming up and the unexpectedness of Jesus, the Son of God dying on the cross. No one ever expected that. No one ever expected that he would be taken down and that he would be buried in a tomb. And certainly no one ever expected or could even imagine that this one could be resurrected from the grave. And now today he is seated at the right hand of the Father. Let this Easter season be a time of unexpected fulfillment in your heart. A time when you recognize who Jesus is. And like Simon the Zealot, you want God to do something new in you. You want to have a new revelation of him. I pray that that will happen for you as you continue thinking about who he is. And I'd also like to invite you to join us here at Evangel on Easter Sunday morning. Pastor Tim will be preaching. We'll have something special for all the kids. It's going to be a great day. A day that you can come and find Jesus in a very unexpected way for yourself.